I've been listening to heavy metal for 20 years, and one of the big things that annoys me is when newcomers refer to metal and hardcore interchangeably. They say that's so hardcore, that's the most hardcore metal band ever. Um, when I started listening to metal, hardcore was still a mostly distinct thing. Hardcore in music, I think that it was first used to refer to a more aggressive form of punk rock. Bands like Discharge, Dead Kennedys, The Exploited, Bad Brains. And then eventually some of those bands became heavily influenced by heavy metal. And then there were metal bands from Anthrax to Pantera, um, Slayer even, that were influenced by the early hardcore bands. And by the time you got to the mid-90s and Earth Crisis came along, it was getting really, really hard to tell hardcore and metal apart. And for what I've seen, the big difference seems to be in musical ambition. That's my metal bias, I guess. A lot of hardcore bands seem to have three modes. The slow, heavy mosh pit part, the full speed, snare drum on every beat, uh, blast beat thing, maybe a slower part, but it's like the way they put that all together feels awfully predictable to me. What's a good example of one of the new hardcore bands? What people might also call metalcore. Um, I can't think of any names right now. Oh, Job for a Cowboy. That's a pretty obvious example there. And you can probably think of dozens of bands in the same vein. Um, Now, I guess that's not to say that just because you're hardcore, you can't be creative. And just because a band's metal doesn't mean they're going to be creative or technically skilled. I could think of countless metal bands that are hopeless amateurs. But overall, that's the difference that I feel uh, tends to be apparent.